Hi, this is Dr. Dara, and I'm in the home of my friend Sam here, who's graciously opened up his kitchen. Been much bigger than my little space, and you can see it's beautiful here. Gonna start with a couple of techniques of how to clean and devein shrimp, and we have different techniques, right? We haven't even discussed what we're going to do yet, but we'll just do a little bit. So let's get started. So the first thing is get the shrimp together and let's throw away anything that we don't want. I think the easiest thing is to actually have a scrap bag that you throw away, because otherwise you're creating more dishes for yourself. So how do you do it? And then I'll show you what I do.
I use kitchen scissors, which is only for food, cut through the bag.
So it looks like they've already cut it. This actually makes it easier. So depending on what kind of shrimp you get, you can have one with the head, you can have it with it already deveined and deshelled. The cheaper ones are going to be the ones that you need to work with the most, like with the heads, which actually can be used in making shrimp stock. But this actually doesn't need any deveining because it's already been done for you. If it's just a question of taking off the shell, then it's really not that difficult to do, because then what I would do is just start peeling. I usually take the legs off. Well, this has already been done, so this is easy. There's a little bit of meat in there which you can pull off, because sometimes people cut it off, but you have some meat in here too. And I'll show you actually a sophisticated way. This is a harder shell, so I use my thumb to pull that off, and then when you take the tail off, the whole thing comes off, and then just make sure it's clean.
Can you show once more how do you actually take the tail off?
Again, this whole thing has already come off because it's already been pre-done, and this whole thing comes off like that. And then there's a hard part over here, so you want to get that off, and then the tail pops off and you get the entire tail. Sometimes people use a fork and knife and they cut off this whole segment. There's food right there of meat. The other thing is, this is what we learned in the restaurant, is that this, if you wanted an elegant presentation for the tail, you want to leave that last segment on, make it the extra notch. You can fan that out and then you clean this part off. That's a little bit dirty.
I had no idea that is
and then, that's dirt right there. If you want to be even more elegant about it, then you can cut off that. It's almost like a butterfly shrimp. That way, when you take it, it's pretty. When I see that, I'm like, oh, they spent a lot of time to take care of that. The other way is you take off this tail piece. That helps remove that last bit, but usually I go from the top first. Again, this little piece is attached to this hard part, but you can pull the whole thing off and get the entire thing rather than cutting off here. And that's what happens also when you have like shrimp with a tail on. It's elegant for presentation purposes, but a lot of people leave that last segment of meat in there, and you can pull it off that way rather than cutting it off here. Eat the whole thing. Wait, you didn't do this one. You didn't take any of it off.
No, I'm not taking any of the shells off.
Oh, you're not taking any of the shells off?
Yeah, because the whole idea of this is like when you fry it, I want the shell on.
Oh, let me show you.
I want them to eat with the shell.
I got it. So you know what you can do in that case is butterfly it.
That's what I was wondering, like, where's all the shells?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I took it off because I didn't realize what you were doing. So what you can do then is also cut this deeper. If you make the deep cut, once you put it in, this whole thing will fly open.
I've tried the butterfly and I've tried this. This comes out like a lot more juicier.
Yeah, because this is presentation to open up. But if you leave it on the shell, and this is true for any time you buy shrimp, that if you leave it in the shell, it's always going to taste better.
Yeah, so that's why I don't like butterflying, because I feel like it dries it out somehow.
Unless you put it in like some sauce like butter and then you have some other sauce for it. If you go to a restaurant and you have the heads and shells all intact, it's not a bad thing. Actually keeps in the moisture. So oftentimes I just do the work ahead of time, because then that way people don't have to do the work later on, and they just appreciate that it's done. So if we had the bait in, do you do it with a knife and scissors?
So I would do to the scissors to get the shell. The reason why I use the scissors is this gives me some control. Doing with the knife requires a lot of technique. This is like actually for a normal person who's not very handy with the scissors, to see if there's any vein with least amount of effort. And if there is, then I just take a little knife and I'll scrape it off.
Do you know what I do? Is the easiest way is to take a fork, one of the tines, and go in. And if I'm not really concerned about the presentation, take the whole thing and I can take the entire shell off with one shot. And then the whole thing comes off, and I've essentially like broke through that. Because I've seen they're cutting it and then they're taking a toothpick and they're pulling it out really gently, and I just like go through each one. So for tempura shrimp, like when in the Japanese restaurant, they make small shrimps look gigantic. Do you know how they do that?
No.
You can tell how big the shrimp is because you think of these like really long tempura shrimps that looks like, wow, look at how shrimp. Do you know how they do that? I'll show you. So this is a normal size shrimp, right?
Yeah, it's a 20-25.
So those numbers, 20-25 is how many are there in 1 pound. If you have, say, 11 or 12, That's how many there are in 1 pound, meaning those big tiger shrimps, the smaller the number, the bigger the shrimp, right? Those 26,
20.
number 26, 28, something like that, or even 31, those are like smaller shrimp because obviously you need more shrimp to get into 1 pound.
Right.
So let me show you how they take really small shrimp and make it into tempura style. And you think that they're using really large shrimp, but really they're not. And then they make cuts. They make cuts at the bottom, like say 1, 2, 3. And what they do, they're pressing it down. And now you've got a really long shrimp compared to something that was much smaller by spreading it out and making it thinner. And then they put the whole thing in a lot of batter. And this is how they extend and make those long shrimps.
Shrimp, wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know
and
that.
then so when you eat the tempura, we're talking the shrimp tempura, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So if you bite into it, you can see how big that shrimp was. And it's
Okay,
really
so you
not
can-
that shrimp. If they really used a big shrimp, then the diameter would be bigger. But because they're using small shrimp, the tempura is maybe this big, and you think it's like, wow, these are really big shrimp, but it's really not. It's extended, and they press it down. And this is how they do it.
Interesting.
We're
I
gonna
didn't know that. Right.
just look how small the shrimp is, right? And then I'm gonna do some little magic. Again, make a little couple cuts here on the bottom, and then press, 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 and you're almost breaking it down and extending it. Now I've got like a much longer shrimp.
Wow.
Much bigger than what they thought. This is not 21, 25 or whatever it is that someone wanted to play with the big boys.